Hare Krishna. Today I will talk about uh, a very serious topic, and that is about realization of truth. And anyone who is practicing spirituality knows that this is the core of spiritual practice. Why practitioners spend hours and hours and hours, or maybe thousands of hours, some spend lifetimes or many lives in practicing. Whether it is Hindus, Jains, Buddhists, Sikhs, Christians, Islamic scholars, or it is Jews, everybody practice to ultimately realize the truth, the absolute truth. And the reason for this is that until truth is realized, the soul or the individual souls experiences two things. First thing is grief, and the second thing is fear. Nobody, no soul can get freedom from fear and grief until the truth is realized. And that is why it becomes so important for the souls or individuals to realize the truth. And it is not easy. It has never been easy. We know how Buddha practiced to realize the truth. We know many seers and sages, and there are scriptures filled with it. Kabir, Nanak, Mira, Rumi, Saint Augustine. There are great beings who have realized the same truth. All of them. Whether you call it Buddha or Mahavir or Muhammad or Jesus Christ, they all realized it. Until this truth is realized, the soul experiences two things all the time. One is grief, the other one is fear. Fear manifests in our life as anxiety, as stress, and grief. We all know. It has many names: depression, sadness. And what is this fear? There is only one fear, and that's the fear of death. And that fear manifests itself in many forms. Anxiety and stress, these are all different manifestations of the same core fear. And the grief is the very nature of life. Everybody talks about sadness in their life, and we have to really work hard to overcome the sadness and feel happy. So knowing this, if one wants to get permanent freedom, absolute freedom from grief and fear, then it is absolutely essential to realize the truth. After Buddha realized the truth, many asked him, what happened after realization of truth? And he said this: there is no more grief. In Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, what happens when truth is realized? He says there is no more grief. Everybody talks about it in negative terms. Nobody says what is gained. It is difficult to speak in positive terms because those things nobody is aware of. If somebody says you experience absolute bliss, nobody knows what is bliss. So there is no point talking about it. In our day-to-day life, what we experience is grief, fear, anxiety, stress, sadness. So what's the way to overcome it? That's the question everybody has. And all these great beings, whether it is Buddha or Jesus or Saint Augustine or Mira or Kabir or Nanak or anybody or Krishna, They all unequivocally said there is only one solution. The solution is realization of truth. And what is this truth? When we talk about this truth, it has many names. Some call it self, some call it Brahman, some call it absolute, some call it all pervading reality. In Bhagavad Gita, this is defined as Nitya Sarvagata Sthanur Achalayam Shanatan. It is all pervading, it's absolute, it's eternal, it never changes, it never moves, it's forever the same. This is called self. It is the self of everything that exists. It is the substratum of the reality. Whether it is nature or it is souls, it is substratum of all that exists in the creation. And until that is realized, the fear and grief continues to hunt each and every human soul. And that is why it is so important to realize it. In Upanishads say very beautifully, until the truth is realized, fear continues. What is the fear? It's the fear of death. Everybody is scared of death. Why? Why we are fearful of death? Because we do not know that we are immortal beings. We never die. Our bodies die, but we never die. But we don't have the realization of that. And that is why everyone is scared of death. And that fear manifests itself in all forms: stress, anxiety, everything, depression, sadness, grief. So we are haunted by this all the time. Now the question is, how do we realize this truth? And when we talk about this truth or the self, it is not something that we can realize outside. It is within us. That particular truth which, by realizing which, one gets freedom from fear and grief, dwells within our heart as our very self. It is the subject. And in Kena Upanishad talks about it very beautifully. It walks through matter, matter knows it not. It walks through mind, mind knows it not. It walks through death, death knows it not. The eyes cannot see it because by the power of this truth, the eyes see. Ears cannot hear about it because by the power of this, the ears are able to hear. The mind cannot think of it because the power of the self, the mind thinks. It is called self. It is also called Brahman. By the power of it, all the senses function. The mind functions. So we cannot think about it. It is not an object of thought. It's not an object of mind. It's something that you can think about. The senses cannot perceive it. So then what's the way to realize this truth? And Upanishad gives indications of that. It says when the mind has become still, the senses has become still, and the mind merges into the heart, the self reveals itself. This truth, this Brahman, the self, it reveals itself. Because between this truth and the soul, there is a cosmic veil. And this is a veil of ignorance. And can anybody remove this ignorance by their own effort? Not possible. Upanishads say it very beautifully. It says that by the grace of Brahman or by the grace of the self, this cosmic veil is dropped from the soul. This veil of ignorance is dropped from the soul, and the soul realizes the truth, and it is freed from grief and suffering. So the question arises that And Upanishads, Brahma Sutra, everything says that by self effort, by tapas, by serious austerities, by meditation, by doing everything, if it is not possible to realize this truth, then what's the way? The scriptures gives one single path, and that path is called path of grace. Say, by the grace of Brahman, by the grace of self, the self is realized. But how to obtain this grace? So the scriptures say that we have to devote ourselves to it, we have to meditate on it, we have to pray to it, so that we can receive its grace. So that is why devotion, bhakti to the Brahman, to the all-pervading Brahman, to the self which dwells in the heart of all beings. It has no form. It has no qualities. It is the source of everything. It transcends everything. One must devote oneself to meditate, pray to this self which dwells in the heart of everyone, to receive its grace, so that this cosmic veil of ignorance can be dropped from the soul, and the soul can realize the eternal truth, or the self, or the Brahman, and it can be freed from grief and fear. Many says that path of jnana can give us realization of this self or truth. But in Bhagavad Gita it says very clearly that by devotion to the Lord, Shraddha, it says Shraddhavan lavate jnanam. So which jnana they are talking about? Lord in Bhagavad Gita says, Jnana Agni Sarva Karmani Bhasmasat Kurute Arjuna. It's an Agni, it's a fire, it's an energy that rises in the heart of the being. When through devotion to the Lord, this fire rises in the heart and it burns all the blemishes that resides within our heart. The soul becomes pure, and by the grace of the Lord, the cosmic veil of ignorance is dropped. So whether you talk about jnana, that jnana arises only through Shraddha or devotion to the Lord. Lord Krishna says very clearly, Shraddhavan lavate jnanam. Through devotion, by worshipping this Brahman who dwells in the heart of all beings. It dwells in our own heart. It has no form, it has no qualities. It dwells in our heart. As our own self, it is the subject. It is not the object of senses. It is not object of the mind that you can think of. It is not the object of senses that you can see, you can hear, you can smell, you can taste, you can touch, you can interact with. It has no form. It has no qualities. It transcends everything. But by its power, all the senses function. By its power, the mind thinks. By its power, we live. It is the consciousness of our consciousness. We are conscious because of the power of its consciousness. We are alive because the force of life that comes from the self, from Brahman, from the truth. So all serious aspirants must devote themselves to this Brahman, the Absolute, the Self. Pray to it, meditate on it, seek its grace, seek its blessings, so that one day, by the blessing of the Lord, by the blessing of Brahman, by the blessing of self, all the blemishes of our heart will be burnt away, and the cosmic veil of ignorance will be dropped, and we will realize the truth. And once we realize the truth, fear will be forever gone from our heart. Grief will be forever gone from our heart. We'll be free from fear and grief. We'll realize our own immortality, that we are immortal beings. We exist eternally. And they say, by realizing this truth, they say its nature is, its very existence, its very nature is Sat Chit Ananda. It's pure bliss. And it is eternal. It's all pervading. It's forever the same. One realizes one's immortality, one realizes bliss forever. Grief and fear is no more. That is why all the great beings have told us to pursue this, to pursue the realization of truth. All scriptures, all great religions are founded on this. Whether it is Buddha or Lord Mahavir or Lord Krishna or Kabir or Nanak or Jesus Christ or any great saints and sages or divine beings who came down, they all spoke about the same thing. And I hope it makes clarity. I am by no means a realized soul. I am also a student of yoga. I practice and I worship and pray that all the practitioners to get the grace and blessings of the self, of Brahman, the all-pervading reality. Hare Krishna.